Welcome to the Simply Joyful podcast live with my special guest, Angela Braniff. Get ready to be encouraged. Well, hello, Angela, and welcome to the Simply Joyful podcast live. It is perfect to have you on over here since you're a fellow YouTuber. So I'm so thrilled to have you on the show.
Yes, I'm so excited. I am a longtime Kristi fan, so I'm very excited to be here chatting with you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I always love to have my guests start off with just telling a little bit about themselves because although a lot of your audience may be coming over here and going like, we love Angela, we know all about Angela. I would love for the audience who is not familiar with you to learn a little bit about you and your story. And of course, we're going to go way into that when we talk about your book, but just share a little snippet about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a mom of a lot of children. I have 8 kids and married to my high school sweetheart. And we have kids through birth and adoption, and I homeschool. I have a couple of YouTube channels. My husband and I have a podcast together. So we have a very, what I like to refer to as full. I feel like that sounds better than I have a busy life. We just have a very full life. And God has really kind of led us down a lot of unexpected paths. I would never have foreseen this for myself. So we're just kind of like every day living like, all right, God, what have you got for us today? Because at this point, it's just, who knows? It's the wild, wild west.
I know. And what's so fun is that, so we'll start with the fact that you wrote a book. You basically wrote your story, your God story, which is so awesome. I love seeing how God works things together, but love without borders. But I love how you opened it because you opened it with, like what everybody pictures, right? It's like you see a happy, like you have a very beautiful, happy picture on the front of your family. And it just makes people go, oh, it's so perfect. It's so perfect. They must just have a perfect little life. But it's also happy. And you pop that bubble right at the start. So I love that. So, what is kind of a typical day? You don't have to match the book, but what is a typical day for a mom of 8 who homeschools? And, now the nation is finding themselves homeschooling, but what is a typical day with all of your kids?
I mean, things have definitely changed and ebbed and flowed over the years, especially with being a basically full-time working mom and homeschooling my kids. And I have never homeschooling and being a mom first has always been my priority. So, but I love my job and I love what I do. So I really want to make them work and find a way to make them work. So my days are very full. Right now in quarantine, I'm not going to lie, we sleep in. Like we're not waking up super early in quarantine. It's like the wheels have come off, whatever goes, cake for breakfast, that kind of thing. But in like normal life, it's pretty much, and my husband is home. He works with me in our business stuff. So I always like to sort of set that precedent, although for, 7 years I homeschooled and worked without him home, but for the last year now he's home too. So he helps me get breakfast going and get everybody dressed and all of that. And then we pretty much block our day with like homeschool in the morning. I try to be finished with homeschool by lunch so that we can all have lunch. And then the afternoon is my time to work. So I really try to keep that sort of balance. And it's worked pretty well for us, especially because I think that's kind of the beauty of homeschooling is the flexibility it gives you. So if it's like, today I have an overwhelming amount of work to do and we just need to not do school today, we'll do it a different day this week, or we'll just skip this day this week and everyone will live. It's really nice to be able to kind of bat that back and forth and ebb and flow and make changes in our schedule where we need to. But it's a busy day. Like I will not make any try to pretend that it's not. It's a busy day. It's a full day. And sometimes it's utterly chaotic. But I think that's like, and that's why I'm like, I wanted to inject that in the beginning of the book and make sure people know that like, I am not trying to sell you a lie of like we're not the Von Trapps or this, I'm not a Stepford wife. Like this is not perfection. No one's lining up on a staircase. Right? Yeah. I mean, no one's lining up on the stairs and taking orders or anything like that. But I hope that people will see like how much joy and happiness we have, even in that like chaotic mess, that it's like such a fun and like beautiful chaos, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think is so neat is when you get to hear people's story. And I know that you're a
Yeah.
storyteller when it comes to what you share on YouTube and everything, but I like how you really, and I think it's true for a lot of us. We kind of we start off, we're young, we get married, and we have this like beautiful little like, this is what my life will look at like. And I remember being told by friends like, you need to get a dog before you have kids. I'm like, what? Why would I get a dog before I have kids? But we did. And I remember thinking they do this so that, because now, you know, like after having kids, you realize that the advice is that you think this dog is going to be so perfectly obedient, but they have their own will and they're just going to do whatever they want to do. And you
Yeah.
try to train, but you can't really. And then you have kids and you're like, oh, right. Like,
I
you
get
know,
it.
you have your own personality and you have your own, all of this. And yet we do that with life as well. We feel like, okay, you know, this is how it's going to go. Life is going to be like this. And, you know, check. And you talk about in the book about how you essentially have this checklist of what your
Yeah.
life was going to look like and how you were going to, you know, do this and get this done. And can you share a little bit about how your checklist kind of got essentially kind of torn to shreds a little bit?
Oh yeah, I feel like you're so right. Like story, the sort of story and vision of what we think our lives are going to be, which is a lot of like sold to us as kids, right? Through whatever
Mm-hmm.
kind of media and stuff we're consuming, we get these visions of what we think our life is going to look like, and then sort of, you know, the different narratives you get told by parents or at church or, you know, wherever about what good looks like, what a good life looks like, what a happy life looks like, what a good Christian woman's life looks like. So you kind of build this narrative and this checklist in your head that's like, okay, I do this, I get married, I have kids, we have a house, I have, you know, everything's just perfect. You just check those boxes, and
Check.
happiness and contentment and all of that is just waiting for me on the other side of completing that checklist. And for me, I'd always kind of had this like deep feeling of that I wasn't really sure. I was like, all right, well, I mean, I guess that's what everyone says, so that's what I'll do. But it didn't really feel like this, that really matched for me. But you know, I was like, I'm just going to trust what the process, right? Trust the process. Just do
That's
it and you'll
right.
be fine.
That's right.
So I did it all. I did all the things that I was supposed to do. And I got married and I had 2 kids and we bought our first house. And I remember it was a few months. We bought our house in February and it was around April that I started being like, okay, Lord, like you told me that the feeling of like contentment and like, ta-da, like that was going to come now, right? Where is it? And then I started really wrestling with, maybe it's me. Maybe the discontent is like, that's something in my heart that I need to work on. Maybe I'm not being grateful. Maybe, you know, and I was really just, I truly struggling with understanding how all these things fit together and where I fit in that. How it was that I was doing everything that I thought I was supposed to do, but still not feeling like, you know, still not feeling really fulfilled in my life or feeling a deep connection to my faith and other things that I craved. And so I talk about in the book, but I had sort of this like Easter morning meltdown where God just used a video that I watched at church about Jesus and his life, and to really kind of open my eyes to the world around me and sort of this idea that, wait a second, if this is the formula, if this is the happy life checklist, how come this checklist isn't available to everyone, to every woman around the world, to every person around the world? Like, if this is the answer, how come it's not available for so many? And that really started that sort of
Mm.
catalyzed this whole journey for me of praying and asking God to like break my heart, open my eyes. I feel like I have blinders on. I feel like I'm not seeing the world for what it is. I feel like I have a very American dream version of Christianity that doesn't seem to fit. And I think there's more, and I need you to show me. And I always now tell people, like, be careful. Just be really
Yeah.
careful when you go to the Lord and you ask him for something like that, because when he does it, it's like, whoosh, it's like a lip waxing. I mean, everything comes off and it hurts. So
Oh.
he really did a number on me after that, and really helped me to sort of let that go and just say, like, I don't need you to check boxes. Like, just come follow me. Just come on.
Mhm.
Like, you don't need to do all of that. I don't care about that. That's not written down as like in my book as your like must do list. So just come follow me. I'm going to show you something better. And that was really like sort of the defining moment for me, where I was like, okay, I'm just going to go along with wherever I feel like he's leading me, and we'll see what happens. And a lot happened.
Yeah, just, 2 kids to 8. That's a lot that happened. So, and your story, what I love is that you started, you adopted 2, and so now you have a beautiful family of 4, and yet you kind of had this tugging on your heart. And I love, that was where I got sucked in to your book, because I catch tidbits of things, but we actually share a fun little tidbit that I want you to tell your story. Then I'll share kind of something similar that God put on my heart, and a fun little thing that we have in common. So please share a little bit about what God told you when you were adopting your 2 boys, and the name, and all of that beautifulness that kind of came together.
Yeah, I had felt really early on, when I first felt like God was saying, okay, adoption is where I want you to go right now. And we were a few months into it, and it was July of 2011. And I just felt like the Lord, like, very clearly gave me this name and said, you're gonna have a little girl, and her name will be Rose. And I remember thinking, like, that's never happened. God's never given me any like clarity on a child's name. So it felt kind of strange, but it was definitive. Like, you couldn't have convinced me otherwise at the time. But then, as our adoption processes went on, what he ended up bringing us was our son Noah from Congo. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I just, maybe I just didn't hear him correctly or something. And we ended up, starting another domestic infant adoption, and we got our son Jonah. And I was like, okay, all right, so there's no Rose here. Like, we've got 4 kids now, and there's no Rose. So I really started to think that maybe I was off my rocker when I felt him telling me that. I thought, maybe I was just crazy. And so we ended up, it was a few years later, that I was scrolling through Facebook one day. And this is why we can't throw social media out with the bathwater, like baby out with the bathwater kind of a thing, right? Because so much good can come from social media. But I was scrolling through Facebook one day, and I had this friend, Stephanie, who did a lot of advocacy work for orphans in China, specifically with special needs. And so I'm scrolling through, and I see that she's advocating for this little girl. She was about 4.5, and her name was Rose. And I was kind of like, oh my, her picture stopped me in my tracks of just this beautiful child. And I clicked it to open and read about her. And so it went on to explain how she had Down syndrome, and she'd been living at this care center for years. And I just felt this pull of like, is this her? Like, is this the Rose that God was telling me about? It felt a little crazy, honestly, to try. That felt like, okay, I'm just reaching here to make this connection. But I went ahead and emailed the agency and just said, because at that time we were not planning on adopting. We were actually trying to get pregnant. We were struggling with secondary infertility. So we were not in any way on the adoption path. And so I emailed the agency and said, can I just look at her file? China allows you to, at least at the time, to look at files. So they said, yes, we'll get back to you. They sent me the file, and I was opening it and looking at it. And at the top it had my birthday was what I first saw. And I thought, well, that's weird. Why do they have my birthday? Why does it say July 30th up there? And then I realized, oh my gosh, that's not that's her birthday. Her birthday is July 30th. That's the same day as my birthday. And it felt like this sweet little connection. And then I looked at the year, and it said July 30th, 2011. And all of a sudden, when like all the blood just drops out of your body and you're just like, you just feel like you're going to faint. All of a sudden it was like, it snapped into reality. Like, she was born the same month and the same year that God told me I had a daughter named Rose. And I just could not, I was like, okay, Lord, like, I know that you are a God of details. This feels very specific. This feels like a very specific detail. Yep. And to me, it was like undeniable, like, how could I not see that? We had this picture of our girls at the beach that they had written the name Rose in the sand. Like, we all knew, like the whole family knew, that we were sort of waiting for this little girl named Rose. And so when he finally, revealed her to me, it was one of those things that I looked back and thought, it had to be this way. There was no other way. At the time when he told me that, we were only, I can't remember, I think 26 years old. You have to be 30 to adopt from China. So we were not old enough to adopt from China. And so I was then 30. When I saw this, I had just turned 30, you know, the few months before. And so we were now eligible to adopt from China, where we would not have been any other time before that. And so it was just like, to me, it just was like undeniable, you know?
Yeah. And what was CR's reaction to everything?
Yeah. So this is the part where we sometimes have to pop the fairy tale bubble, because to me, it was Disney princess-esque. If a bird had flown in the window and landed on the windowsill and sang me a song and told me that this was my daughter, that was basically what this felt like to me.
Yeah.
And my husband was like, what? You want what? You want to adopt a little girl from China? She has Down syndrome? I don't know anything about raising a child with Down syndrome. Like, his reaction was, I need a minute. And I thought, this is like a lightning bolt. Like, this is like an angel coming down and speaking to you. How can you not, like, how can you have any question? But he did. He wasn't sure. And it flabbergasted me, but I realized very quickly that I would never want to force my husband into something like that, or try to make him feel as though I was forcing him. Adopting a child is obviously a very big commitment, lifelong commitment, and specifically a child with Down syndrome, where we don't know what the future will hold. So I knew that I could not push. I had to let the Lord do his work in my husband's heart on this, that I could not push. And so I attempted to back off and just let my husband pray and think about it on his own. And he did, you know, eventually come to see things the way I did. It didn't take him very long, just a few days, but I think it just took him completely off guard, and he needed time to pray and talk to God himself and make sure that he felt the same way. But yeah, it was hard when what you see as like undeniably what you're supposed to be doing, and the other person doesn't see it the same way you do. I mean, he does now, but in the moment it was just all overwhelming, you know?
And I think there's a lesson there, because my husband and I we have, more I was reading a book, I'm like, we have very similar moments in that you share it. I was like, oh, like kindred spirit. But like, that's one thing that I've learned through the years, is that, you know, God doesn't always speak to us, like my husband and I, at the same time in the same way. And we've seen that time and time again. And it's interesting, because now it's like the further we get into our marriage, we're aware of that. So that's the key, is being aware that God does speak to us differently. And sometimes he will put things like a lightning bolt in me and not do that with him. And so then it's just, you got to work through that and let him do it. And, you know, we have a whole God story of how we even got past having two to five. Like he was done at 2. But when we were kind of crazy and similar, was that when we were, I can't even remember exactly the timing. I just remember I was folding maternity clothes. I remember where I was. I remember I remember I was wearing a purple shirt. So I think I was pregnant with my third. And I think it was before we knew it was a boy. But I remember just having this like still small voice that was just kind of like, you're going to have a girl. And then I just remember thinking, and you're going to share a birthday. There was something in there. There was going to be a girl. And I don't know how that kind of came into my head. I kind of felt like it was from the Lord, but it was kind of jumbled. And so I was just praying as I was, you know, folding these maternity clothes. And then we took a little test. We did like that 12-week blood test, and we found out we're having a boy. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I thought for sure it was going to be a girl. I really did. I thought, oh goodness, how can it not be a girl? And all my friends are like, we prayed so long for this pregnancy. Of course it's going to be a girl. And what's amazing is like, Wade is just so awesome. And so, I mean, like the moment you hold your child, you're like, and you're perfect. Like, you're exactly who I needed. But lo and behold, we had 2 more. We had 2 girls. And my oldest, I went into labor on my birthday. So my oldest girl went to labor on my birthday, had her the day after. And then my youngest, I had her the day before my birthday, and I got to go home on my birthday. So we're July 15th, 16th, and 17th. So
that is so awesome. Yeah, Rosie and I share a birthday, and the twins, my twins are born 2 days before my birthday. Because I was kind of like, listen, it's a lot to share your birthday with one kid. If I share it with three, I'm never going to have another birthday again.
no, yeah, you got to let it go.
It's so funny how we get these feelings about something and you can't explain it and you don't know why, but it doesn't always play out how you think it will.
Yeah.
And I feel like what I've seen in my own marriage and in other people who I've spoken to and have messaged me, our husbands are so often, and I think this is why, sort of the husband-wife structure based on sort of just normal character traits, if you will, of men and women, is that my husband is, he wants to protect our family. He wants to protect our family's safety, our family's security. What does that look like long-term financially? Like that is where his head goes. Whereas for me, it's like these emotional pulls that say, it's a lot easier for me to say, I know that the Lord's just going to take care of us and I just trust him to do that. So I'm just listening to the heart things and he's listening to the head things. And so sometimes we have to figure out how to meet in the middle between the heart things and the head things. And it's good to have both because they balance each other out. If it was up to me, our lives would probably be even crazier than they look now because I'm just like, let's go. All right. Let's move to Africa. Let's move here. And my husband's like, well, I mean, maybe let's just wait and do this or do that, so it's always interesting how the balance of that is good in the end,
It is so good. And yeah, it is true because that's exactly, Steve's like thinking through all of the components and everything else. Whereas I'm just like, not that I'm totally emotional, but it's like my heart, God touched my heart and I have to wait for God to work on him. And yeah, Steve and I actually shared our whole story, which I'm always very guarded on when I talk about our marriage or when I talk about different elements. And so it was fun to have him and get to actually share like the whole story. Because it took a friend's wife passing away for God to like shake him and be like, hey, you need to listen. This is what I'm doing. So it's like, it wasn't my nagging voice. It was God orchestrating things beyond anything I could have ever planned, for us to end up for him to be open to having more kids. So it's so important, to learn that balance and to learn God does speak to us differently and that's okay. Cause again, like you have that fairy tale, like you were saying, like the little birdie comes up and it's like, of course. And Prince Charming comes in and goes, anything you want, dear. That's how we do it. But it's like,
just kidding. You can't have that. I'm not going to do that. No. Yeah. It's definitely a balance that I think it took me a long time to learn, and also to learn the magic art of not nagging and praying and asking God to do the nagging for me. I learned that made a big difference in my marriage when I said, okay, fine. I am not going to bother you. I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to pray for you. Sometimes praying for someone appears as though it's a threat, but it's really a good thing in the end. They just need to trust you.
Is that so funny? I know my godmother told me early in my marriage, and this is before, like I actually saw it quoted in a movie. So I'm like, somebody talked to my godmother, but I remember my godmother telling me early in my marriage, she goes, submission is all about ducking low enough so God can whack him. And I was like, oh, I'm done.
That's my favorite. That needs to be on a t-shirt or some kind of like tea towel that you get at your bridal shower or something.
That's right.
It's a magic art.
It was so good. And so that was the best way. So I always think to myself, I'm like, I'm not going to get through to him. It really comes down like my words won't necessarily get through to him, but God can. So yes, it was so funny. But okay. So one thing, people are going to look at your pretty family on the cover and they're going to say, you said you're a mom of 8. There's a miscount. So it kind of broke my heart. I'm like, oh, redo the cover. But tell us about number 8 real quick. And then we want to talk about where to find the book.
I so wish that I could have redone the cover. I was unable. It was too far in the process.
Too far. I get that.
The process is a long one. And at some point they lock it all down and say no.
Yep.
But I do think it's really a beautiful, like, at the end of the book, if you read the last chapter, and when I tell in the last chapter of what I feel like God is calling us to, and it's almost like, I hate to say like a prophecy, but it is crazy how what I say in the book about what I don't know, and maybe this will happen, and maybe that will happen, and maybe it'll be like this, all happened. And so it's so crazy because I sort of ended the book with, that I felt like the Lord was calling us to adoption again. And I just didn't know what was going to happen. And we ended up being placed with a little boy in September of this past year. And so that brought us to the crazy number of 8 children as our little Benjamin, who's 7 months old now. And it breaks my heart that he's not on the cover. But it's, it's kind of one of those things like you can't control all of that. And there's a book too. So there's a second book. So
there we go.
He'll make it on that one.
I love it. No, I remember watching that because you kind of you went quiet a little bit. Like there's this thing where it's just like, okay. And I remember it's like, I was reaching out to you about something and I'm like, oh, she's not texting. She's not writing back. And I was like, okay, what's going on? And then when I saw it and I watched the whole thing of you bringing him, because you surprised the kids with him. And I thought that was just, that was too much. So I'll link to that video.
Yeah, it was. Well, we had a failed adoption right before that. Where we had been matched and we told the kids and got them. They were all so excited. And then I flew to the state where the expecting mom was and met with her and ended up, realizing very quickly this situation was not going to work out. And it wasn't what was in her best interest and all of that. So it was actually a really beautiful moment where God used me to help her in a way that I was really honored to be used. So, but it's still children sometimes have a hard time making sense of those things. It was hard for me and it was really hard for the kids and they were sad. And so I felt like when we got the call about Benjamin, there was a revocation period in the state where he was born of 4 days. So he had been born, his birth mom had signed the termination, but there was 4 days where she could change her mind. And I just told my husband, I said, I can't put the kids through that. So let's just tell them that we're going on a business trip. And then if everything works out fine, my mom can bring the kids down. It was just, a state away. And so my mom can bring the kids down to meet us on this business trip just for fun. And we can surprise them. And I thought if we can pull this off, if this all works out well, it will be a beautiful memory for my family. And it was exactly that. And I love that video so much, especially because my oldest daughters they love children. They love our big family. They love when we had a new family member and their reaction just like brings me to my knees with tears. It was just so beautiful.
It was so beautiful. Oh, I love it. Well, thank you for sharing your life with us and, writing it down. And I mean, what a beautiful legacy for your family too, just to see the way God brought them in and brought you, this gathered nest that you have, which I think is just so beautiful. So where can people find your book? Because it's hot off the presses. So where can we find it?
Yeah, it's available pretty much everywhere books are sold. So it's Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble, IndieBound, Books A Million. Pretty much all of the bookstores are carrying it right now. So I'm very excited about that.
That is awesome. And congrats on Target. That's really
Thank
exciting.
you. Yeah, I was really excited about that.
People out there don't know, like that's a big thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm not in the Target store. I'm just online. But still, that was exciting enough for me.
Foot in the door.
I was happy with that.
I know. Yeah. Well, I mean, not much is in Target anymore. Anyway.
Right.
I know it's hard to find hard-covered books or just real books anywhere.
But it's kind of the same players over and over again. But yeah, it was really neat to see that. So I was like, I shop there all the time, and I didn't know. I just stumbled across it. I didn't even know it was going to be there. So I just stumbled upon it online, and I was like, wait a second. So it's really exciting.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on the book and babies and all that fun stuff. And
thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much for coming on the show and telling your story.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved it. So fun.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Simply Joyful podcast. Be sure to check out all the episodes available from the podcast by going to simplyjoyfulpodcast.com. Also, be sure to subscribe here on YouTube so you don't miss all of the other videos that we have coming your way. Have a great rest of your week, and don't forget to live simply and be joyful.